my father enlisted in the Army Medical Corps when he was past the draft age. He was in early 40s, and because they needed some doctors who were not of draft age but who were well trained enough and had enough experience that they could lead a medical facility.
Right.
And so he became head of the 108th General Hospital, which was a hospital out of Loyola Medical School. And actually, he hadn't taught there. He did most of his teaching at Cook County Hospital. But anyway, he headed this group, and they eventually found their way to Normandy, where you went with us to see Utah Beach, where Grandpa had arrived. After D-Day, though, was it like 30 days after D-Day?
Oh yeah, it was like 30 days after D-Day.
I think it was 30 days after D-Day. I could look in your journal because it's here.
Well, hold on, we can do that.
Was that after he came in on D-Day and set up the tent hospital in St. Mary Glace and had all these sort of adventures during the Battle of the Bulge and so forth. Finally, he got his group together and they marched into Paris the second day after Paris had been liberated. And he said that they told him to take his pick of any of the hospitals in Paris. They were the first hospital unit that arrived. So they said, pick any hospital you want and set it up for your 108th hospital service. So he looked around Paris. They gave him a car and a driver, and he looked at all the hospitals, and he picked out the
was it the big one?
Hôpital Beaujon. And the Hôpital Beaujon had been was a very new hospital that had just been built when the Nazis came and took over Paris, and it was used as the Luftwaffe hospital, and it also had the offices for the head of the Luftwaffe, who was Hermann Goering, who was one of the big Nazi heroes. And so my father had Goering's office, and when my father went into the hospital, the patients who were in the hospital were still Luftwaffe patients. I mean, they came in just 2 days after it had been taken, so the American patients hadn't yet been moved into that hospital. They were leftover German soldiers.
What did they do with them?
They treated them. They took care of them. They took care of them. And I remember in my father's journal, he talks about taking care of these German patients, which was sometimes very difficult for his doctors to do, knowing that these had been the people who'd been killing their friends.
Yeah.
They were the enemy. But my father had to talk to them and said, we're doctors. This is what we do. We take care of people. We don't, whether they're Nazis or they're American soldiers, what we're here to do is take care of people. And so this is what you're going to do. And so they did. And they did this for a week or so before things were changed. But one of his stories was that he, when someone was operated on, for instance, or treated, he made it a point to go into that Nazi soldier's room and bring in with him some doctors and say, I'm head of the hospital. I know you're doing better. We're glad we could treat you properly, and I want you to meet Dr. Finkelstein, who is your doctor. He's one of my best Jewish. I always made it a point to.
We talk about what he found in the office that he had, because that was great.
The office of Hermann Goering. He said, well, there was a big red. I guess they left in a hurry, and he said there was a big red sash, the kind that you wear across the uniform.
Miss America.
And he brought that home, and he brought a Luger,
the gun,
a German pistol, and we had that around in the basement for a while, and then he gave it to your grandpa, my husband, and we had it around, and finally one day John said, why do we have this gun around? Somebody's going to get hurt. So he took it to the fix-it shop in Winnetka and sold it to them. So
how much did it?
We don't have the Hermann Luger
pistol
anymore.
You got rid of the sash, right?
But my father, in his journal, talked about the furnishings of the office and so forth, and said, but it was a funny thing in this this hospital, and especially in my father's office, there were signs that there had been pictures. You know, nails on the wall where there had been pictures, but there were no pictures left.
Oh.
Well, my father never knew when he wrote his journal, because it never came out until years after the war, that the Germans were grabbing all that art and storing it in secret bunkers under the ground and so forth to get. Hitler wanted to build a museum someday of all his art, the stolen art, or Goering did too. And they had all this art. There's a PBS show called the
Rape of Europa, or the
it's the Rape of
Europa, I think, or
Europe, the Rape of Europe.
Yeah.
And it's the whole story of all this art that was stolen that had belonged to French and particularly Jewish families.
Yeah, that's Kucharski's favorite.
Art.
Yeah.
It had been hidden, and obviously my father didn't even know. He just kept saying he must have had a lot of pictures because there were all these nails on the wall. Well, he did. They were Picasso and Monet.
Oh my God.
And, heaven knows what else.